The reason why Black History Month, at least in America and Canada, is celebrated in February is because there was a man called Carter G. Woodson who decided, he was an American historian and scholar, and he felt because Black people being the minority in America, Black history wasn't given a platform for people to learn about it. So he formed an organization called the Association for Study of Negro Life and History. And that association now is called the Association of the Study of African American Life and History. It's the one behind Black History Month. He started it in 1915, and then in 1926, what's Black History Month now started as Negro History Week.
Why do we celebrate it here? I think Blackness is universal, you know? Regardless of the geographic location, there is a oneness that comes with sharing a skin color.
I feel the Black History Month is about us Blacks identifying ourselves as Blacks.
So we've been doing Black History Month commemorations as LitFest for about 4 years now, if not longer. And the spirit of it is exactly that, for unity, to show solidarity. The theme for this year's Black History Month is Black Health and Wellness, to focus on practitioners, the history of people who have contributed to the medical space, to the health and wellness space as Black people.
She is a storyteller with no ink to tell the stories that are sealed behind walls too paper thin, that have kept the thread from reaching the end. She is a raving wind, blowing the mind into tiny little pieces that fall upon ears caught on wood, that listen to rhymes but cannot hear the reason. We can't dance to reason, we can't move to reason, we can't listen to reason. To the rhymes that make him make her, the blood that flows in the veins, the cocktail cells that she, the storyteller, has made up in her mind. Rhymes she has felt as she has walked along walls that have kept their stories, only to tell her with no ink and not write with glee upon his story to make her story come true. She is a storyteller with no ink. Let her live. Let her speak.
We are going to get into a session which is meant to be a reflection on how the contributions of Black people to the medical industry. Like we mentioned in our intro, there sometimes is a pervasive idea that Black people lag behind when it comes to contributions to the medical space. Innovations, inventions, new ways of dealing with medical issues. And then also with an eye on, given that history, what does this mean for the future, and what do we need to do in the future to ensure we persist and maintain our contributions to the medical space. So to help me unpack this issue, I'm joined by Mr. Chamunorwa Mashoko.
Darangu imfundo nsekuru Chamunorwa Mashoko. Kumshando vauchpinge. As a cultural advocate, I also move such nuances in terms of how best can we use what we already have to our benefit. So I think it also fits well with the creativity that is needed in the medicine by Black people for Black people. You know, what I've observed, particularly with HIV/TB, is mostly dependence. We depend on support financially. We depend on the research that is done on medication, research that is done on behaviors. However, the contribution that we are giving to the landscape within HIV/TB is knowledge. We are contributing immense knowledge to the knowledge body. Why? Because being a country, Zimbabwe, Africa, and other countries that is experiencing a high HIV prevalence rate and even TB, you would find that most of these researches for treatment are actually carried out here among Africans and other races who are living or negatively impacted by HIV.
But let's look at the innovation side of it, because if most of the research is being done here, does that imply by extension that most of the innovations are coming from here?
In terms of innovation, the starting point is for us to understand our language. Once you understand your language, then you are able to vibrate to solve problems that you face.
We concentrate too much on choosing political leaders. Our life is full of choosing political leaders instead of choosing solutions for our life.
We not only live in a global industrial, military industrial complex, but we also have the global pharmaceutical, industrial complex. And I'm talking about, also wanting to, reflect on Madagascar. What chances do you think we have as Banuatema?
So because we are in systems, the system that you mentioned, we have a system that adopted a system where medication is regularized. Even pano nikada kutanga kushopera semuna anobva kuchipingo, I need to be registered to do that, because it also has everything to protect the users of your services. So what we need to do is to normalize our operations.
It seems to me that as blacks, maybe starting in the US, where there's also a powerful black lobby, people descendant from Africa that were enslaved, they are also out to say, don't exclude us from other human beings, which is fine. I can understand their context. But do we have to shout to the world that we are blacks and we can do things? If the parallel market can attract people, like he said, and people start flocking there, why don't we do our own things?
If we look at our things here in Africa or in Zimbabwe, for instance, we don't accept anything that do not have an English name. For instance, I can take the issue of the Quobeds. They have the English name and the Shona name. So people accept them because they got the English name and the Shona name. So if something doesn't have an English name, it's hard for us to take it and to accept it as something that belongs to us because it doesn't have an English name. So we are so much into this English world that we forget our roots and we forget ourselves.
Let's understand our language. The wisdom is in the language. Let's not blame. No one owes you nothing. Whether you are an African or you are whatever, the world don't care. I think you see what is happening right now. The world don't care. Self-care, your health starts with whom? With you.
The enticing rhythm of the Mbakumba, calling you to celebrate this festival called life. We rebuke hard life and embrace soft life, because soft is the vision that my ancestors had for me when their calloused hands were toiling for me. They saw my essence in the softness of the cotton that they picked in their robbed fields. They felt my delicacy in the fluffy softness of the cotton balls they had in their hands. You shall have the balls, they proclaimed, to live a life full of unapologetic vibrance. You shall have the balls, they proclaimed, to live a life and paint the world a gold-rich melanin so strong that nothing else can hold it back except for gold chains themselves. So who am I? Who am I to defy the freedom which is written in the lamentations of my ancestors? Who am I? Who am I to dare breathe extra small oxygen through my extra large nostrils? Who am I? Who am I to dare shrink when I wear the black excellence that my God wrote on the veins of my lineage? So we shall live. We shall dance in octaves and freedom, because we need to kick Namwa and his associates to the curb, because our narratives will no longer be written by struggle, but instead they are of opulence. Say it with me: opulence. Opulence. Vibrance and wholeness. The threads of our time shall no longer knit a dress of generational hurt and trauma, but they shall build a frock of generational health and bliss because we deserve it. The wrinkles in my grandfather's smile run deeper than the lines of his frowns, so I shall stand in line for joy. Blackness is a rhythm that don't even make sense, but we dance to it anyway. Because we are joy.
So I would like to welcome the next panelists for that discussion. That is how traditional medicine and alternative medicines contribute to Black health and wellness. So to have that discussion, we have Dr. Nyarai Paweni, who will be moderating the session, with Mr. Jonathan Goredema, who will be joining the session as an expert.
So, what role does traditional medicine play in health and wellness? Before we get into this conversation, I want Jonathan to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
My name is Jonathan Dube. I work as an artist, traditional healer, and also as a cultural practitioner. Kana makatotarisa makatarisana nenganga yanga ichitaurwa nevataura vaya vaya.
I'm Dr. Nyarai Paweni. I'm a naturopathic doctor. I have great respect for traditional medicine because all alternative medicine comes from ancient traditions, people who've been practicing natural medicine in all different kind of ways.
Becoming a traditional healer in our communities. Unongove munhu weya anotarisirwa pasi. Anzi uri munhu asingazive. But rikaenda kutaurire, I'm one of the scientists vanoziva mishonga yechivanhu. Zvokukutaurira macharacteristics emushonga zvaunorapa, kukuudza kuti iwe chirwere chauri kunditaurira ichi ingave cancer, because now mambotaura sekuru chamunoro ndikataura ndorapa cancer ndinosungwa nema world standards. Thank you very much, doctor. I'm very happy because he reminded me something. You have reminded me of these times of corona pandemic, where everybody was a traditional healer. Yes. Everybody became a traditional healer in this time because munhu wese anga akuchika kufa. Zumbani rinorapa, mashizha echakati anorapa, zvikazodai zvinorapa, vanhu vakamhanya kusvika pakunwa snuff. Munhu wese kuchika kufa. Ndakati right, this is balance of nature.
But the thing is, we can work together. There's no difference, right? We just have a different way of sharing that information. But I can learn from him and he can learn from me. COVID came and changed a lot of things. But how are we going to take the information that we're getting today to make changes in healthcare, to make changes to make changes kuma clinics?
Tichitanga kupractice tainyara kuti ukonzwiko uchitaura chivanhu. Saka sharing yatanga yamuri kuibvunza iyi doctor iri kufamba zvakanaka. Zviri kuita zvakanaka kuti hama dzedu dzimwe dzacho dzaamuchivanhu, dzimwe dzacho dzaingeja zvinenge zviri nani. Vatomboonawo kuti chivanhu chiriko. Chokwadi ngoma izvezvi kuti dzarira kana mbira dzikarira. Vamwe vacho vanenge vachitomhanya kunosvikirwa ipapo.
We are ignoring the spiritual part of us as blacks, right? Inini ndikarota sekuru vangu ndinonzi mweya wakaipa, right? And I don't solve it because ndatsikirirwa kunzi mweya wakaipa. But there is something that needs to be done.
The most complicated situation in Zimbabwe is spirituality. If we don't try to fix it the spirituality way, we are not going to recover as a country. We are not going to recover. Philosophy dzatakuda kushandiswa ndedzi adzisi dzedu. Ngatigadzire dzedu. We have to invent our own philosophies. Tigogadzira zvinobva muma traditions edu imomo. Tigadzire zvinhu zvedu zvinoshandira isusu
in my research of traditional healers, it's body, mind, and spirit. You are not separate from your mind. Sometimes you have a mental issue that causes a physical condition, or you have a physical condition that causes a mental issue, right? And then also figuring out who are you spiritually. There's a lot of research. There's all these things about mindfulness, mindset, whether you pray, whether you meditate, whether you hug a tree. You need to do something that connects you to your source, whoever your source is.
You need to have your own indigenous, to have indigenous perspective, so that unogona kucreate chinhu chichibva ungange uchichiita muchirungu asi chichibva mauri. Dzidzo iyoyi kana anchiti munhu anozoita PhD kana kuti munhu anozoita masters and stuff in whatever, asi zvichizobatsira muzvinhu mukuburitsa zvekwedu.
We have to have self-love, right? So you have to know who you are and love you, and in order then to market it to us, ourselves. If you think black culture is big business, music-wise, clothes-wise, even the way you dance, you know, all these dances that people are doing that happen in South Africa, people in America are doing. We just don't value who we are, right? There used to be a slogan, I'm black and proud, right? So can we bring that back?
I mean, what makes us, forget some of these things? You mentioned technology, right? If maybe in a group of 20 and ask Matombo ever great Zimbabwe, right? What makes us forget? What makes us, be unaware of our ancestral generic memory bank?
I want to say, Kuti, I think as young people we have to be very intentional about reclaiming our identity. I'll take myself for example. I thank my parents every time because they raised me as a Shona girl. Taenda kumusha, taitaura Shona, chirungu chako chaigumira kuchikoro chipinda mota, maswera saying, right?
Yeah, so growing up, I hung out around a lot of white people. Ndaitambira kuna na reps theater, but the problem is reps theater kune one age group 60 plus. Akuna mwana mdiki ku reps theater azviti, unongowa munhu rakupi azvite, right? So growing up, I actually didn't think kuti young white people existed. Ndaisafunga kuti kune a 20-year-old, ndaifunga kuti zvinhu zvinongoonekwa mu-TV chat. It's a myth. Kuti Disney created mermaids, princesses, and young white people. It was not a thing. Zvokuti mazita ese evarungu vari ku-reps theater munomaona parad concession. That's how old those people are. It's crazy, absolutely.
Coming up next is the keynote presentation. And in this keynote presentation, our discussants or panelists will be discussing and analyzing how the Shona novel dissects, analyzes issues to do with health and wellness.
I was asked to talk about how the Shona novels deal with mental health issues. I guess this request is to do with the fact that I love using madness as a literary device to take our thinking to levels that make us uncomfortable and even vulnerable in order to enable truth-telling. While for some madness is just a folly, I think below the surface there is a warning that no one is safe from their own mind or fears. Now, if we go back to Shona novels by the first generation writers, one can see a strong advocacy for marriage and raising a family. Good mental health for the African is based on equilibrium. Things must be stable, and for things to be considered stable, it means we are not seeing forces that come to upset that harmony, that balance. And unlike in the Western world, where people are islands, living their lives as individuals, the African world, especially before colonization, was about togetherness. This means there was a common purpose and an understanding that problems were shared, or else they would affect families, go on to affect the village, go on to affect the land. Mungoshi, like Chakaipa, seems to dichotomize life in this way. The rural has peace of mind, is sincere, has contentment, has deep and meaningful relationships, and there is true prosperity. The urban, on the other hand, has vices, is unstable, is fake, and has greed, selfishness, and poverty. You get to hear Herbert Chitebo in Sokorisnamsoro talking about ndakajisa magwere amai munyara ndikatizira kuna mbuya vakandikashira kunge tisina kutadza. There is always somewhere where you are accepted, you are accommodated, you are not an island, you are not alone. In the Shona novel, when Africans leave the basic rules and expectations of Hunu that socialized them so as to get re-socialized by capitalism and modernity, they are bound to become diseased and destabilized. Re-socialization reconfigures and reorients one's sense of social values, beliefs, and norms. Globally, modernity is seen as an indicator of civilization and success. But the Shona novel is saying this type of civilization is retrogressive and destructive because it is foreign.
Our stability stems from a kind of life, a kind of mentality, a kind of mindset which harmonizes with the person next to you. If you understand the person next to you, you're home and dry. If you understand who they are, their likes, their dislikes, and you are able to relate with them, as far as I'm concerned, that is enough. When you go outside that set, for example, you say I have nothing to do with family, but you've studied a family, then you're in trouble. There is a norm which you are expected to follow, and if you don't follow that name, conscience, your conscience troubles you. And it depends to what level. If it goes beyond certain threshold, you can go mad. If it goes beyond certain threshold, you can become alcoholic. And all these things, they have a karma that is ingrained in them. There is an intrinsic karma. For every wrong that you do, you will then have to pay in one way or the other.
Black skin, white mask. You know, a fellow black man would, you know, when they are talking, you know, probably in their speech, you'd acknowledge that this person is oriented in the beliefs of the African people. But, you know, the way that particular person, you know, dresses, behaves, and handles other black people, you'd wonder, because there's a contradiction between his words and his behavior. So that's the problem that we have in our context. That is really giving us, you know, problems. We have an external problem that has created an internal, you know, problem.
Tuku says that on everything wako chimiro chako nedzinza rako pembedza rurimi kweredzimbo. Now, if you are the guys who are supposed to probably correct some of these things, I'm looking at, you know, young mothers to be, you know. So I was saying, if suppose you don't have your language, then what is it that you are going to pass on to your children? What is going to become their mother language? If you don't have your mother language, so what are you going to pass on to them? And who are they going to be?
We can modernize Africa on the basis of African treasures, you know, heritage, and unthinking colonization. And how do we unthink and, you know, rethink ourselves or modernize ourselves? We modernize on the basis of our treasured, you know, heritage. You know, our forefathers and foremothers left us with something that we can invent from, which is our culture.
Let us not apologize, you know, for who we are. We are our own selves, and it's not a mistake that we are black and that we are Zimbabwean. I think we should be proud of ourselves.
We need to actually stop being, I would probably say, too dependent to the extent that we think we are not able to find our own solutions.
I am so excited to have been part of the LitFest event today. Tadzidza Zvakawanda. I felt like it was very important for us as Black people to be able to trace our own Black narrated history, which I'm guessing you already know is something that does not happen so often, and that on its own has been very enlightening. I hope and I wish that we keep having more of this.
Through interacting with different people, I've learned a lot, especially mental health, drug abuse, and everything that was going on through. I've learned a lot.
An amazing day chatting about Black health, traditional medicine, and wellness on a global level. It was really powerful, highly dynamic. It was great to meet interesting participants and poets and practitioners.
Hi, I'm Brita Masale Chilini, and I was moderating a panel, this discussion on the relationship between literature, art, and all sorts of cultural elements with regards to herbal remedies in this day and age that we actually do live in, and had a very wonderful panel. And I think it has brought to the fore the very critical and essential aspects of what our cultural heritage is, but also our livelihood, and some of the things that we're losing within the fabric of society as a result of invasion of different cultural beliefs or behaviors. So having people who are social changers, I think it's so important that they steer the upcoming generation who have no connection whatsoever to a cultural heritage, to start showing them a direction which is going to help them in turn. Because herbal remedies have been there for thousands of years, and I think we need to just constantly be revising and bringing to the fore what we have been losing. Medicine comes from the ground, and we all know that. However, the way in which it is then processed is very different. So the sooner we begin to embrace the heritage that we actually do have, the diversity of our cultures as well, and incorporate it into the different arts, which is then telling a story or changing a narrative, then we will go a very long way, because we need an identity, and I believe our identity is found in those things.
So I had a great time, and this was very eye-opening, and this was very impactful, and I really had a great time because I think before I came, I had a different understanding of what Black history is all about. I thought maybe Black history was just about, African Americans or Africans in the diaspora that are just celebrating, being Black in a country where they're like minorities compared to us here in Africa, where the majority is like Black people. But understanding that Black History Month is a celebration of Black people, where we came from, and how we've overcome. So I would really love for more of these programs to continue, because it's quite eye-opening, and just in terms of our culture, appreciating our culture and just appreciating where we come from, and not having to let other people from outside dictate.
Ngatirambe tichita such workshops, share my ideas, and I would like to encourage more young people to come so that they can listen to different things and activities.
I love this session. I love this connecting with people, learning back about who we are, where we come from, and the future, what it means. And as Black people, we need to take ownership and pride of where we've come from, the journeys, the things which our ancestors knew, how we can use that knowledge to become better people. That's one of the key takeaways I've taken, is that who are we? Who are we really? Right now we stand here thinking like the things we admire, the things we want to do, but they are meaningless because they are conceptions from other places, other people. Now this session made me think about who I am, where I come from, the things which have made me, me.